The morning sun flooded the Sterling mansion's kitchen, turning the granite countertops into gleaming mirrors that reflected Elena Morales' weary face as she scrubbed away last night's dinner remnants. At 29, with calloused hands and a practical ponytail that hid her exhaustion, Elena had been the family's maid for 7 years. Invisible, efficient, the one who made their opulent world sparkle without ever being part of it. Victor Sterling, the 65-year-old billionaire whose real estate empire spanned continents, was away in Tokyo, or so everyone thought. His wife Sophia, 48 and perpetually poised in designer loungewear, treated Elena like a fixture, her commands sharp as the knives Elena polished daily. The phone rang suddenly, its tone piercing the quiet hum of the dishwasher. Elena glanced at the caller ID, Victor's private line. She wasn't supposed to answer personal calls, but something in her gut urged her to pick up. "Elena," Victor's voice came through, strained and urgent, like a man whispering from the edge of a cliff. "Listen carefully. Sophia is not who she says she is. The marriage is a sham. There's a file in my study safe, code 7482. Get it to my lawyer, Thomas Reed, immediately. And Elena, you're more than just the maid. You're—" A sharp click ended the call, but not before Elena heard Sophia's voice in the background, cold and accusing. "Who are you talking to, Victor?" "You fool." Elena's heart pounded as she pocketed the phone, her damp rag forgotten on the counter. The kitchen door swung open, and Sophia entered, her blonde highlights catching the light like shards of glass, her smile too perfect, too practiced. "Elena, darling, is everything all right? You look like you've seen a ghost." Sophia's eyes flicked to Elena's apron pocket, suspicion glinting in them like sunlight on a hidden blade. "Just a telemarketer, Mrs. Sterling," Elena lied, forcing her voice steady while resuming her scrubbing, the lemon scent now cloying in her throat. Sophia lingered, pouring herself a glass of sparkling water that fizzed softly in the bright room. "Victor called me from Tokyo this morning. He sounded off. If he contacts you, unlikely, but if, let me know immediately. We wouldn't want any misunderstandings, would we?" Elena's nod was mechanical, but inside questions swirled like the water draining from the sink. Misunderstandings? And that unfinished sentence. "You're more than just the maid. You're—" What could Victor mean? She'd always sensed his quiet kindness, the extra envelopes of cash slipped into her paycheck with notes like, "For your future." But this, a secret file, a sham marriage? As Sophia swept out, leaving behind the faint trail of her expensive perfume, Elena slipped into Victor's study, her footsteps muffled on the thick carpet. The room was a sanctuary of leather-bound books and polished wood, sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the manicured garden where bees danced among blooming roses. The safe was behind a painting of a stormy sea, its waves frozen in eternal turmoil. Elena's fingers trembled as she entered 7482, the mechanism clicking open with a soft whir. Inside, a thick folder labeled Truth waited. She opened it under the window's warm glow, pages rustling like whispers. Bank statements showed millions funneled to offshore accounts in Sophia's name. Emails detailed her affair with Victor's rival, a man poised to take over Hale Properties. Medical reports confirmed slow-acting poison in Victor's system, traced to Sophia's vitamins. But the final document stopped Elena cold. A DNA test from 29 years ago, naming her as Victor's biological daughter from a brief romance with Maria Morales, Elena's mother. The world tilted. Elena sank into Victor's leather chair, the sun warming her back as tears blurred the paper. Her mother had always spoken vaguely of her father, a kind man who couldn't stay, while they scraped by in a tiny Texas apartment. The anonymous monthly checks that paid for rent in Elena's books now made sense. Victor's silent support. His journal entry confirmed it. "Maria refused my help openly to protect Elena from Sophia's wrath. I've watched from afar, arranging this job to keep her close. My daughter deserves the truth." Footsteps approached, the sharp click of Sophia's heels. Elena shoved the folder into her apron just as the door opened. "What are you doing in here?" Sophia demanded, her shadow falling long across the desk. Dusting, ma'am, Elena said, standing quickly, but Sophia's eyes narrowed on the slightly ajar safe. You're lying. What did you take? She advanced, grabbing Elena's arm, nails digging in. Hand it over. Elena pulled free, backing toward the window where garden light framed her like a spotlight. Let go! I know everything. Your affair, the poison, the lies. Sophia's face twisted in fury. You little thief! Victor's delusions mean nothing. Give me the file, or I'll make sure you and your pathetic mother rot in poverty. The struggle erupted, Sophia lunging, Elena dodging, papers scattering like confessions in the sunlight. But as Sophia grabbed the DNA test, her eyes widened in horror. No, this can't be. You're his daughter? Before Elena could respond, sirens wailed outside, growing louder against the peaceful garden backdrop. Help had arrived, but would it be in time to stop Sophia's unraveling rage? The phone rang in the sunlit kitchen of the Sterling mansion, its shrill tone cutting through the morning quiet like a knife through fresh bread. Elena Morales, the family's maid for 7 years, paused mid-wipe of the granite countertop, her hands still damp from the lemon-scented cleaner. She wasn't supposed to answer personal calls, but the caller ID showed Victor Sterling's private line, the billionaire owner himself who was supposedly in Tokyo closing a deal. Elena, his voice crackled through, weak and urgent. Listen carefully. Sophia is not who she says she is. The marriage is a lie. There's a file in my study safe, code 7482. Get it to my lawyer before she finds out. And Elena, you're more than just the maid. The line went dead, but not before Elena heard Sophia's voice in the background, sharp and accusing. Who are you talking to, you fool? As Elena stood frozen, the kitchen door swung open, and Sophia entered with a predatory smile, oblivious to the call that had just unraveled her perfect world. If stories like this remind you that truth has a way of emerging from the shadows, even in the grandest mansions, and that one person's quiet strength can topple empires of deception, then you're in the right place. Hit that subscribe button and join the Acts of Depth family, because what Elena discovered next about her own connection to the Sterling fortune will leave you believing in the power of hidden bonds and hard-won justice. Elena had started working for the Sterlings at 22. Fresh off a bus from a small Texas border town where she'd grown up in a single-room apartment with her mother, scrubbing floors after school to help pay the rent. Now 29, with dark hair always tied back in a practical ponytail and calluses on her hands that no lotion could soften, she moved through the 20-room mansion like a shadow, invisible yet essential. Victor Sterling, the 65-year-old real estate tycoon whose developments dotted skylines from New York to Dubai, treated her with quiet respect, often leaving extra cash in her paycheck envelope with notes saying, "For your dreams." His wife Sophia, 48 and perpetually polished with salon-perfect highlights and designer athleisure, saw Elena as furniture, useful but replaceable, someone to order around with clipped commands like, "Clean the guest suite again. I can still smell yesterday's dust." The job paid well enough to send money home to her mother, who battled diabetes on a fixed income, but it came at the cost of dignity. Sophia's barbs were constant. Don't touch the silverware with those hands. Who knows where they've been? Victor would sometimes intervene with a gentle, "Sophia's just stressed, Elena." But his absences grew longer as business pulled him away, leaving Elena to navigate Sophia's moods alone. What kept Elena going was the small library in the East Wing, where she'd sneak during breaks to read books Victor had collected, volumes on architecture, philosophy, and self-made success that mirrored his own rise from poverty. One book in particular, a worn copy of The Alchemist, with Victor's notes in the margins, had become her talisman. "Follow your personal legend," he'd written on the title page, a phrase that made her dream of something beyond dusting chandeliers. The call that morning shattered her routine. Victor's voice had been strained, not the confident baritone she knew from his rare home days. And that unfinished sentence, "You're more than just the maid. You're," hung in her brain like an unsolved puzzle. Sophia's entrance had forced Elena to pocket her phone quickly, but the woman's eyes narrowed suspiciously. "Is everything all right, Elena? You look like you've seen a ghost." Just a wrong number, Mrs. Sterling, Elena said, forcing a smile while resuming her cleaning, her heart pounding against the apron pocket where the phone burned like evidence. Sophia lingered, her gaze lingering on Elena's face. Well, make sure lunch is ready by noon. I have guests coming, and I won't tolerate any delays. She swept out, leaving behind the faint scent of her expensive perfume. But Elena caught the way Sophia glanced back, as if sensing something amiss. Once alone, Elena slipped into Victor's study, a room of leather-bound books and mahogany panels that always smelled of aged paper and cigar smoke. The safe was behind a painting of a stormy sea, just as Victor had once mentioned in passing during a rare conversation about security. Her fingers trembled as she entered 7482 and the door clicked to open. Inside was a thick manila folder labeled Truth. Elena opened it carefully, sunlight from the window illuminating pages of documents. Bank statements showing massive transfers to offshore accounts in Sophia's name, emails detailing an affair with Victor's business rival, and medical reports confirming Victor had been slowly poisoned over months. But the last page stopped her cold. A DNA test from 29 years ago, naming Elena as Victor's biological daughter from a brief relationship before his marriage to Sophia. The study door creaked slightly as Elena closed the folder, her hands shaking so violently that the papers rustled like leaves in a sudden breeze. Sunlight streamed through the window, warming the room but doing nothing to chase the chill that had settled in her bones. Victor Sterling, her employer, the man who'd shown her small kindnesses over the years, was her father. The DNA test listed her mother, Maria Morales, as the other parent, with a note in Victor's handwriting, confirmed paternity, kept secret to protect Elena from Sophia's jealousy, monthly support sent anonymously. Elena's mind raced back to her childhood in that cramped Texas apartment, where her mother had worked double shifts as a seamstress, never speaking of her father except to say he'd been a good man who couldn't stay. The anonymous checks that arrived like clockwork each month, always enough to cover rent and a little extra for books. Elena's one escape. She'd assumed they were from a distant relative or charity, but now it all clicked. Victor's quiet generosity, his habit of asking about her studies during rare conversations, the way he'd once slipped her a scholarship application for community college with a knowing smile. But why the secrecy? The folder provided answers in Victor's private journal entries, scanned and included. Sophia discovered the affair after our marriage. She threatened divorce and scandal that would ruin my fledgling business. I agreed to cut contact with Maria and Elena, but I couldn't abandon them entirely. The support was my penance, my silent promise. Elena's eyes filled with tears, blurring the words. All those years feeling like an outsider in this mansion, invisible labor in a world of wealth, and she'd been connected to it by blood. The revelation burned, mixing joy with betrayal, joy at finding a father, betrayal at the lost years. Sophia's voice echoed from the hallway, pulling Elena back to the present. Elena? Where are you? The lunch preparations won't handle themselves. Panic surged. Elena shoved the folder into her apron's deep pocket, the weight of it pressing against her like a secret too heavy to carry. She slipped out of the study just as Sophia entered the kitchen, her eyes narrowing at Elena's flushed face. Were you in the study? You know that's off limits. Just dusting, Mrs. Sterling, Elena lied, her voice steadier than she felt. I heard a noise. Thought a window was open. Sophia studied her for a moment, then shrugged. Well, get on with lunch. And Elena, Victor called earlier from Tokyo. He sounded off. If he calls again, let me know immediately. The implication hung heavy. Sophia suspected something. Elena nodded, her mind whirling as she chopped vegetables, the knife's rhythmic thump matching her heartbeat. Victor's call had been a warning, but now it was clear. Sophia was dangerous, perhaps capable of more than jealousy. The folder mentioned incidents. A suspicious car accident involving Maria years ago, ruled accidental, but with notes from a private investigator suggesting foul play. As the afternoon wore on, Elena served lunch to Sophia and her guests, 3 socialites gossiping about charity galas while picking at their salads. She moved invisibly among them, refilling water glasses, but her ears caught fragments. Victor's been so distant lately. Business troubles, I hear. Sophia, you'll be set once he's gone. Sophia laughed lightly. Oh, darling, one can hope. The casual cruelty of it fueled Elena's resolve. After the guests left, she slipped away to the staff quarters, a small room off the kitchen with a single window overlooking the vegetable garden. There she photographed every page of the folder with her phone, sending them to the lawyer's email Victor had provided in his call. But as she hit send, a shadow fell across the window. Sophia, peering in with a look that said she knew more than she let on. Elena's phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. File received. Stay safe, Victor. But safe from what? As Elena pocketed her phone, Sophia entered the quarters without knocking, a first in 7 years. We need to talk, Elena, about that call this morning. Sophia's presence in the cramped staff quarters felt like an invasion, her designer perfume clashing with the faint scent of laundry detergent that always lingered in the space. Sunlight filtered through the small window, highlighting dust motes dancing in the air, as Sophia closed the door behind her with deliberate slowness. Elena's heart raced, but she kept her expression neutral, folding a towel to occupy her hands. That call this morning, Sophia said, her voice honeyed but edged with steel. It was Victor, wasn't it? What did he say? Elena met her gaze steadily. He asked about the household, Mrs. Sterling. Nothing important. Sophia's laugh was sharp, echoing off the plain white walls. Nothing important? Victor doesn't call the help from Tokyo for chit-chat. You're hiding something, Elena. I've seen the way he looks at you, almost paternal. Disgusting, really, considering your background. The insult stung, but it also ignited something in Elena, a spark of defiance fueled by the folder's revelations. She thought of her mother, Maria, whose only memento was a faded photograph tucked in Elena's wallet, showing a young woman with hopeful eyes standing outside a modest diner where she'd met Victor all those years ago. That photo had been Elena's anchor through lonely nights, a reminder of resilience passed down like an heirloom. Mr. Sterling has always been kind, Elena said carefully. Unlike some, Sophia's eyes narrowed. Careful girl. Remember your place. Now hand over your phone. I want to see the call log. Elena's hand instinctively went to her pocket, protecting the device that held the photographed evidence. That's my personal property, Mrs. Sterling. And this is my house, Sophia countered, stepping closer, the sunlight casting her shadow long across the bed. Until Victor returns, if he returns, you answer to me. Now give it. The standoff lasted seconds, but it felt eternal. Elena's mind flashed to a memory from her childhood, one she'd buried under years of survival, the day her mother had sat her down at their rickety kitchen table, sunlight slanting through cracked blinds, and told her about the generous stranger who sent money each month. He can't be with us, mija, Maria had said, her hands rough from sewing, but he cares in his way. Promise me you'll make something of yourself, something he could be proud of. That promise had driven Elena to this mansion, to endure the indignities, but now it took on new meaning. Victor hadn't abandoned them. He'd protected them from Sophia's wrath. I won't, Elena said firmly, her voice gaining strength. Not without Mr. Sterling's permission. Sophia's slap came swift, the sound cracking like a whip in the small room, leaving a red mark on Elena's cheek. You insolent little. The door burst open and Rosa, the elderly cook who'd worked for the Sterlings longer than Elena, rushed in. Mrs. Sterling, what's going on? I heard shouting. Sophia composed herself instantly, smoothing her blouse. Nothing, Rosa. Just disciplining the help. Mind your business. But Rosa's eyes met Elena's, conveying silent support. As Sophia stormed out, muttering about firing them both, Rosa whispered, Be careful, Nina. She's dangerous when cornered. Elena nodded, rubbing her cheek, but her resolve hardened. She needed to get the folder to Victor's lawyer, but Sophia's suspicion meant she couldn't leave the mansion without raising alarms. Slipping into the garden for a moment of air, where bees buzzed among blooming jasmine, Elena made a quick call to the lawyer's office from her phone's hidden app. I have the file, she whispered, but I can't deliver it. Sophia knows something. Stay put, the assistant replied. We'll send someone. And Elena, Victor left instructions for you specifically. You're to be protected at all costs. The call ended, leaving Elena staring at the garden's fountain, water sparkling in the daylight. Protected? As Victor's daughter? The word felt foreign, like a title she hadn't earned. But as she returned inside, overhearing Sophia on the phone in the hallway, find out what that maid knows and handle it, Elena realized protection might be exactly what she needed. Sophia's guests had left, but the mansion felt more like a cage than ever, its bright rooms hiding shadows of deceit. That evening, as sunlight faded to golden hues, Elena prepared dinner mechanically, her mind piecing together more from the folder she'd memorized. Victor's journal mentioned Sophia's first husband, who died under mysterious circumstances, leaving her a small fortune that kick-started her social climbing. Was it coincidence or pattern? The thought chilled her as she set the table, the silverware gleaming under the chandelier. Sophia dined alone that night, her eyes following Elena's every move. You've been with us a long time, Elena. Loyal in your way, but loyalty can be bought. Tell me what Victor said, and I'll make it worth your while. Elena's response was silence, but inside questions swirled. If Victor was her father, why reveal it now? And what truth about the marriage would change everything? The mansion's conservatory glowed with late afternoon light, tropical plants casting long shadows across the tiled floor as Elena arranged fresh towels by the indoor pool. Sophia had retreated there after dinner, swimming laps with mechanical precision, her strokes cutting through the water like accusations. Elena's cheeks still stung from the slap, a reminder that Sophia's composure was a thin veneer over something volatile. She busied herself folding linens, but her thoughts kept returning to the folder hidden in her quarters, its contents burning in her memory like sunlight through a magnifying glass. Sophia's past, detailed in Victor's notes, painted a picture of calculated ambition. Her first husband, a mid-level banker, had died in a boating accident off the coast of Florida, leaving her a seven-figure insurance payout that she'd used to infiltrate high society. Victor had met her at a charity gala, dazzled by her charm, but the journal entries grew darker over time. Sophia's spending is out of control. She mentions her first husband's untimely end with a smile that chills me. Elena wondered if Victor had married her knowing the risks, or if love had blinded him until it was too late. As Elena turned to leave, Sophia emerged from the pool, water dripping from her swimsuit onto the sun-warmed tiles. Elena, a word. Her tone was casual, but her eyes were predatory, scanning Elena's apron as if she could sense the hidden truth within. Yes, Mrs. Sterling. Sophia wrapped herself in a robe, the fabric whispering against her skin. You've always been reliable, discreet, but today you seem distracted. Is there something you want to tell me about Victor's call? Elena's pulse quickened, but she met Sophia's gaze. He just checked on the household, ma'am. Asked if everything was running smoothly. Sophia stepped closer, the chlorine scent clinging to her like a warning. You're lying. I can always tell. Victor doesn't confide in maids. Unless, she tilted her head, a sly smile forming. Unless there's more to you than meets the eye. I've seen the way he favors you. Extra pay, little gifts. Is there something improper I should know about? The accusation landed like a splash of cold water, but it also revealed Sophia's jealousy, a motive Victor had mentioned in his notes. Elena thought of her mother again, how Maria had described Victor as a kind man trapped in a golden cage, words that now made sense. There's nothing improper, Elena said firmly. Mr. Sterling is a good employer, that's all. Sophia's laugh echoed off the glass walls. Good? He's a fool. Always has been, but fools can be useful until they're not. She reached out suddenly, grabbing Elena's arm. Empty your pockets. Now. Elena's free hand instinctively protected the folder's hiding spot in her apron. Let go, Mrs. Sterling. You're hurting me. The struggle was brief but intense. Sophia yanked at the apron, tearing a seam, but Elena pulled away, backing toward the door. You'll regret this, Sophia hissed. Pack your things. You're fired. As Elena fled to her quarters, the hallway's polished floors reflecting the overhead lights like a path of judgment, she locked the door and checked her phone. A message from the lawyer's office. Agent en route. Stay hidden. Victor is safe and returning. Safe? From where? The pieces were falling into place. Victor's call hadn't been from Tokyo, it was a distress signal. But as Elena barricaded her door with a chair, she heard footsteps approaching, heavy and determined. Sophia's voice came through the wood. "Open up, Elena. We need to talk about your future, or lack thereof." The knob rattled and Elena's breath caught. She clutched the folder, realizing that her future might be more tied to Victor's past than she'd imagined. If Sophia discovered the truth now, before help arrived, Elena might not live to claim her birthright. The chair scraped against the door as Sophia pushed harder, the wood groaning under the pressure like a warning of impending collapse. Sunlight slanted through the small window of Elena's quarters, illuminating motes of dust that swirled in the confined space, making the room feel even smaller. Elena backed against the far wall, clutching the folder to her chest, her mind racing for an escape. The window was too high and narrow, the only other exit the door Sophia was assaulting. "You can't hide forever, Elena." Sophia's voice muffled through the wood, laced with a desperation that revealed her unraveling. "I know Victor told you something. Hand it over and maybe I'll let you leave with a reference. Resist, and I'll make sure you never work again. Anywhere." Elena's phone buzzed in her pocket. A text from the lawyer. "Help arriving in 5 minutes." "Hold on." But 5 minutes felt eternal as the doorframe splintered slightly under Sophia's persistent shoving. Lena's eyes fell on her mother's photograph on the nightstand, Maria's hopeful smile a beacon in the chaos. That image, faded from years of handling, reminded her of whispered bedtime stories about a kind stranger who watched over them, stories that now revealed themselves as veiled truths about Victor. A louder crack echoed as the chair leg gave way and the door burst open. Sophia tumbled in, her hair disheveled, her eyes wild with fury. She spotted the folder immediately and lunged for it. "Give me that!" Elena dodged, circling the bed, the folder's edges crumpling in her grip. "This proves everything, your lies, the poisoning, the affairs. Victor knows. The lawyer knows. It's over, Sophia." Sophia's laugh was manic, bouncing off the plain walls. "Victor? That weak fool is in Tokyo, dying slowly from the complications I arranged. And you? You're nothing. A maid with delusions. Hand it over." The struggle intensified as Sophia grabbed Elena's arm, nails digging into skin like thorns. Elena twisted free, backing toward the window where afternoon light warmed her back. "He's not in Tokyo. He called me this morning. He knows about the marriage, how you trapped him with lies about your past, your first husband's accident. And he knows about me." "You?" Sophia paused, confusion flickering across her face before dawning horror. "No, that bastard. You're the whore's daughter, Maria's brat. He promised he'd cut ties." Elena's voice steadied, empowered by the truth. "He did, for my safety. From you. But he never stopped caring. The money, the job here, it was his way of watching over me." Sophia's face contorted and she charged again, knocking Elena against the wall. The folder flew open, papers scattering like leaves in a gust, DNA results and journal entries fluttering to the floor. Sophia snatched the DNA test, her eyes scanning it wildly. "This changes nothing. I'll destroy it. Destroy you." A new voice cut through from the doorway. "You won't destroy anything." Victor Sterling stood there, flanked by two plainclothes detectives and the lawyer, his frame filling the entrance like a barrier against the chaos. The sunlight haloed him, making his arrival seem almost divine, though his face was drawn from whatever ordeal had kept him away. "Daddy?" Sophia's voice cracked, the word a mix of shock and feigned innocence. Victor ignored her, his eyes locking on Elena with a tenderness that confirmed everything. "Elena, my daughter. I'm so sorry it took this long." The detectives moved in, one cuffing Sophia's wrists as she screamed denials. "This is a setup. He's supposed to be dead. I mean, in Tokyo." "You arranged the complications in Tokyo," Victor said coldly. "Your hired thug botched the job. I've been in hiding, gathering evidence with the authorities. Your greed ends here." As Sophia was led away, her protests fading down the hallway, Elena stood amid the scattered papers, the room's warmth finally reaching her core. Victor approached slowly, picking up Maria's photograph from the nightstand. She was the love of my life, briefly but truly. You look just like her. The revelation crashed over Elena like sunlight breaking through clouds, illuminating years of isolation with the promise of belonging. Victor's embrace in that sunlit staff quarters was tentative at first, like sunlight tentatively warming a long shadow corner. But it grew firmer as Elena leaned into it, years of unspoken questions dissolving in the simple act of being held. The detectives had taken Sophia away, her screams echoing faintly down the mansion's corridors until they faded into silence, leaving only the distant hum of the garden's fountain. Elena pulled back slightly, studying Victor's face, the lines of exhaustion around his eyes, the gray in his beard that spoke of recent trials. You knew all along? About me? Victor nodded, guiding her to sit on the bed, the mattress dipping under their weight. From the beginning, Maria contacted me when you were born, but Sophia, she was already in my life, her jealousy a force I underestimated. I thought sending money anonymously would protect you both. When Maria passed 5 years ago, I arranged this job through an agency, watching over you from afar. But the poisoning attempts made me realize I couldn't stay silent anymore. Elena's fingers traced the edges of her mother's photograph, the frame warm from the window's light. She never told me. She said my father was a good man who couldn't stay. I thought it was because he didn't care. He cared too much, Victor said softly, enough to stay away. But no more secrets. The marriage to Sophia was built on convenience. Her social connections helped my early deals, but love faded quickly. She trapped me with threats of scandal, just as she did with her first husband. The file proves it all, including evidence that his accident was no accident. The lawyer, Mr. Thompson, entered then, carrying a briefcase that gleamed in the afternoon glow. Mr. Sterling, the police have Sophia in custody. With the recordings from the call and the folder's contents, the case is airtight. But there's the matter of your estate. Victor turned to Elena. The mansion, the company, it's all yours now. Not as charity, but as your birthright. I've already transferred majority shares to you. Hale Properties needs fresh vision, someone with integrity who understands struggle. Elena's breath caught, the weight of it overwhelming. I don't know anything about running a company. You're my daughter, Victor interrupted gently, and you've run this household with more grace than Sophia ever managed. You'll learn just as I did. Liam from accounting, trustworthy, sharp, will help. And I'll be there if you'll have me. The offer hung between them, sunlight painting the room in warm hues that softened the edges of past pains. Elena thought of her mother's sacrifices, the quiet strength that had carried them through poverty, and realized this was the legacy Maria had dreamed of. Not wealth, but recognition, a place at the table. I want to know you, Elena said finally. Not as my boss, but as my father. But Sophia, what happens to her? Victor sighed, the light catching a flicker of regret in his eyes. Prison, likely for life if the murder charges from her first husband stick. Justice, Elena, but also mercy. I'll ensure she has a fair trial.